Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. There's been quite a flood of reports and commentary recently.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a range of sources. We're looking at news articles, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, New York Magazine, AP, Politico.
Gulf Today, the New Republic, too.
Right, Fox News, Spotlight PA, and even some online forum discussion just to get a feel for that side of things.
So our mission here really is to cut through the noise. We want to understand the main stories, the narratives developing around Senator Fetterman, specifically about his health, his behavior, and what looks like a pretty significant shift in his political alignment.
Okay, so where do we start? The health concerns seem like the logical place.
I think so. That New York Magazine profile, the one described as deeply sourced, it really seems to have lit a fire under this whole conversation, hasn't it?
It absolutely did. You can see its impact on how people are talking about him now. And what's really striking, I think, are the concerns reportedly coming from his own staff, past and present.
Yeah, that's the core of it. People saying they don't quite recognize him anymore based on these reports. And then there's that letter, Adam Jentleson, his former chief of staff, writing to Fetterman's doctors back in 2024.
And it wasn't just, vague worries. The reports say Jentleson pointed to specific things: long, rambling, repetitive, self-centered monologues, really concerning stuff.
He even suggested, didn't he, that Fetterman might not be following his recovery plan, maybe issues with medication.
Exactly. And I mean, coming from a former top aide directly to doctors, that's pretty serious. It makes you wonder what prompted such a direct, potentially, damaging move.
And beyond the personal accounts, there's data, too. The New Republic pointed out his voting record.
No, his attendance, reportedly the lowest in the past 2 years and third worst this year when they published.
Which, is a concrete measure. It's not just subjective opinion. That's about showing up to do the job.
It is. And while senators miss votes sometimes, sure, a pattern like that, well, it raises questions about representation, about being there for key decisions. You have to ask how much the health challenges might be playing into that.
Then there was that car accident. Really serious stuff. Reported first in the New York Magazine piece, I think. And Gulf Today picked it up, too. Happened May or June 2024.
Yeah, the reports suggest he fell asleep driving. And apparently, staff had raised concerns beforehand. His wife was injured, too.
That moves it beyond just personal health, doesn't it? That's about potential risk to others, judgment.
Absolutely. And Gulf Today specifically mentioned how these incidents are fueling questions about his cognitive faculties and stability. It really underlines the responsibility that comes with that office.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Talk about the reports of, erratic or concerning behavior. This paints a different, maybe even more troubling picture.
Yeah, like that alleged incident with the union leaders. The New Republic covered it. Spotlight PA, too.
And the details reported seem pretty consistent across those sources.
Describing him yelling, banging fists, asking these really almost desperate questions. Everybody's mad at me. Why does everyone hate me? What did I ever do?
And the aide reportedly having to end the meeting.
Yeah.
And being seen crying afterwards. Wow, that speaks volumes about the atmosphere in that room.
It really does. And Gulf Today also touched on supposedly frequent and heated personal exchanges with his wife, Gisele, over issues like Israel and Gaza.
Which, okay, that's more personal, maybe less directly tied to Senate duties, but it adds to this overall picture of strain, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests, significant pressure points in his life, personal stress that could easily bleed over into his professional capacity. How does that kind of stress interact with the job's demands?
And then the story about the meltdown. January 2025, over a vote. Again, New York Magazine and Gulf Today reported on this.
Right. Sounded like deep despondency. Thinking about quitting D.C., locking himself in his office.
Fighting with his wife, crying on FaceTime with staff. It suggests a really significant level of personal distress.
Taken together, these aren't just, bad days at the office. It points towards something deeper, maybe a struggle coping with the immense pressure, possibly amplified by the health issues we talked about. Makes you think about the support systems, or lack thereof, for people in these high-stress roles.
Okay, let's pivot to his political stances now, because that seems to be another major thread here, a shift, particularly away from progressives.
Definitely. His very strong, very vocal support for Israel after October 7th is probably the biggest flashpoint.
It's such a stark contrast to where many progressives stand on that issue.
Absolutely. And you see sources like Fox News and Gulf today highlighting the pushback, disgusted condemnations, they called it, and how his former online social media army among progressives now, quote, detest him. That's a huge political shift. Breaking with your base like that?
And it's not just Israel, is it? He's also backed tougher border policies, engaged in bipartisan talks there.
Right. Which, again, puts him at odds with some on the left. But it's earned him praise from Republicans like Senator Mike Braun. It suggests he's rethinking some priorities.
Maybe looking for common ground, even if it angers parts of his own party.
That could be part of it. What's driving that move? Is it conviction? Strategy? Hard to say from the outside.
He also called for Senator Menendez to be expelled. Not necessarily a standard progressive line. And then the votes for Trump nominees. Gulf today specifically mentioned Pam Bondi.
Ah, yes, the Bondi vote. That was seen by some Democrats as, like, the ultimate betrayal.
Why that one in particular?
Well, Bondi was just a really controversial figure for many Democrats. Confirming her felt like validating the Trump agenda, pushing back against things they cared about. So for Fetterman, who ran as a progressive, to vote yes, yeah, that caused a lot of anger. Disillusionment, even.
And amid all this, the New Republic noted he hasn't been seen much back in Pennsylvania. Only one public appearance since August, at the time they wrote that.
Which, for a guy who built his brand on being out there talking to people, that's noticeable.
How do you think that plays back home? Less visibility?
It could definitely raise questions for voters. Is he accessible? Is he representing them effectively? And it fuels speculation, you know. Is it health? Is it strategic because of these political shifts?
All these shifts seem to be leading to a kind of isolation within the Democratic Party itself. Politico had that report saying few fellow Democrats have rushed to Fetterman's defense after the New York Magazine story came out.
Yeah, that was striking, the lack of public support.
Why do you think that is? What did Politico suggest?
They pointed to a couple of things. A sort of go-it-alone attitude, perhaps, and maybe not having those deep, long-standing relationships with other elected officials. It shows how important those networks are, right? Especially when you hit turbulence.
Definitely. And Politico also mentioned private talks happening among Pennsylvania Democrats about potential primary challenges, even finding a replacement if he stepped down.
Which really tells you the level of concern, doesn't it, if those conversations are happening even privately among key party figures?
It's significant unease. And it wasn't just unnamed sources either. Politico named names, Representatives Houlihan, Scanlon, Summerlee, all indicating very limited or basically no recent contact with him.
That silence or that distance from key players in his own state party, it really highlights the isolation, suggests a breakdown in communication, maybe trust, too.
So while that's happening on the Democratic side, what about the Republicans? Because there seems to be a very different reaction there.
Yeah, quite the opposite, actually. Politico described a growing warmth toward Fetterman among GOP senators.
A growing warmth. Why? What's behind that?
He seems to be tied directly to him breaking ranks on some of these issues we mentioned. They see him as independent, someone sticking to his guns, especially when he goes against the progressive line.
So they respect that he's not just towing the party line.
Apparently so. You even have Republicans like Senator Kevin Cramer saying they're open to partnering with Fetterman on policy.
Which is quite a journey from when some were calling him a radical socialist, as Politico reminded us. Now suddenly they like him just fine.
It really shows how fluid political alliances can be, doesn't it? Deviate from the expected script, and perceptions can change fast. He's created some unexpected openings, it seems.
Fetterman himself had a pretty blunt take on it, too. Except their old attacks were just all bullshit.
Yeah. Very Fetterman. Shows he sees the shift, maybe with a bit of cynicism about political attacks in general.
So amidst all this swirling commentary and reporting, how has Fetterman himself responded? He hasn't exactly been quiet.
No, definitely not. He's pushed back hard on any suggestion he's unfit to serve. His office put out a statement about that union meeting, remember?
Right, they framed it differently.
Yeah, called it a spirited conversation about our collective frustration with the Trump administration's cuts to our education system, trying to put a more politically acceptable spin on it.
And the New York Magazine article? He didn't hold back there.
Not at all. Called it a dumb hit piece. Blamed it on disgruntled former staffers peddling lies and half-truths. A very strong counterattack.
Basically trying to discredit the messengers in the message.
Exactly. And he's also made a point of saying publicly that his actual doctors and my family affirm that I'm very well, trying to offer reassurance on the health front.
We should also probably touch on a couple of other contextual points that came up in the sources. That 2013 incident with the gun and the black jogger. Tanisha Long brought that up again on Twitter, didn't she? Golf Today mentioned it.
Yeah, that incident keeps resurfacing. It's used by some critics, particularly on the progressive side, to point to past actions they see as problematic. Its reemergence now kind of underlines the disillusionment some progressives feel.
And the reactions from other public figures have been all over the map.
Really varied. You had Jonathan Last saying flat out he needs to resign, Sarah Longwell calling it career-ending.
But then Kirsten Sinema, maybe surprisingly, defended him, called the NY Mag piece a despicable hit piece.
Yeah, and Matthew Iglesias had that interesting take. Basically, go back on his meds to own the haters was the gist. It just shows how polarizing this whole situation is.
People see it through very different lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dave McCormick, the Republican Senate candidate in PA, offering a really strong defense.
That was notable, calling Fetterman authentic and a fighter, saying they have a great relationship, coming from a potential GOP opponent.
What's the strategy there, do you think?
Could be smart politics in PA, appealing to a broader audience, maybe people who sympathize with Fetterman or admire his maverick streak. Shows things aren't always strictly partisan.
Even Bill Maher floated the idea of Fetterman running for president in 2028.
Yep.
And you see conservatives defending him now.
It's quite a turnaround, that kind of cross-party interest or defense. It really signals something significant has shifted around him.
And finally, just proof this is being talked about widely, the GBCN forum thread. Fetterman doubts explode into Capitol Hill firestorm.
Right. It shows these aren't just Beltway insider concerns. The discussion is filtering out. People are debating it online.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear this is a really complex, really layered situation surrounding Senator Fetterman. We've drawn on a lot of different reports and commentary.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. Those significant health concerns backed by staff accounts, Jentleson's letter, the voting record, and then the reports of concerning behavior like the union meeting incident.
We also look closely at his political shifts, Israel, the border moving away from many progressives, which seems to be causing real isolation within the Democratic Party.
An isolation highlighted by the lack of public defense from fellow Democrats, contrasting sharply with that growing warmth we talked about from Republicans, who seem increasingly open to working with him.
And we covered Fetterman's own responses. The strong denials, calling reports hit pieces, insisting he's well. Plus those wider reactions, from calls to resign to surprising defenses.
It's a lot to process, so maybe the final thought to leave you, the listener, with is this. In today's supercharged political climate, how should we assess these kinds of reports about a public figure's health, their behavior? What's the responsibility of the media and us as the public in trying to get a fair picture when things are this complicated and, frankly, this polarized?
Yeah, something definitely worth thinking about after hearing all this.